All right, we are back again. Listen, we just had a big old technical difficulty. I don't know how many of you heard us say hello, and then we disappeared. So,
Mm.
this is called the world of technology. She's so smart, right? And she does things that and I'm calling it a she. I don't know why. I feel like it's
What you
got to
trying
be
to
a
say?
girl.
Trying to say?
It's gotta be a girl. So hopefully, I did send out an email to get everybody back up on this platform with us, and you guys can find us here in just a moment. And while you're getting in, we'll go ahead and just say good evening and reintroduce ourselves. Gang for the third time because we are back on day 3 of help healing everyday life problems in a COVID 19 world. Yes, this world is not the world we used to know, but I am one of your co hosts, Dr. Shayna D. Lewis. And I am a licensed professional counselor, a motivational speaker. I am also an educator, a trainer, an advocate. Y'all, I am literally just a servant. That is who I am and what I do. And so allow me to introduce the second half of Beacon Institute, Dr. Rochelle Whitaker.
Thank you, ma'am. I am Dr. Joe Whitaker, educational psychologist, mental health therapist, parent educator, author, but most of all, I am an educator, bringing knowledge to the people. And so I am excited for day 3. We have a awesome expert that is going to share some information that is going to help propel us um, into greater things with our mental health, especially as in regards to depression, anxiety, and grief.
Exactly. And I think when we were talking about which topics to bring up on this summit, definitely grief was at the top of the list because we know we are in a world right now that looks 100% different than anything we've ever known before. And it is so important that we address the things that folks are actually dealing with right
Mhm.
now. So I am looking forward to this conversation today as well. So just do us a favor as you come into the room, say hello in the chat box. Let us know that you are here and tell us where you're from. Know that this is a live discussion. So if you have questions, or you have anything that you agree with or don't understand, please feel free to ask those questions in the chat box. We'll be happy to answer those along with our expert tonight. So, without further ado, I'll go ahead and let Dr. Rochelle Whitaker go ahead and give us some intros.
All right. So tonight we're talking again about grief, depression, and anxiety. And so in the US, we have hit the 100,000 mark of people being diagnosed with COVID-19. And so what we know is, or what the stats are saying, is that depression and anxiety are on the rise. These mental health issues are at unprecedented levels. Some of the concern, though, is that because of social distancing and stay-at-home orders, that people aren't able to recognize the symptoms that they are experiencing as such, which that creates a whole nother issue. But what we're going to do is have a guest on tonight that is going to talk about these things and help us to know when we're experiencing them, how to cope with them. And so we have Dr. Ajita Robinson with us tonight. She is known as the Expert Therapist. She is a grief and trauma therapist, best-selling author, international speaker, and income strategist. She has been seen in places such as HuffPost, Washington Post, Business Insider, Bustle, and Therapy for Black Girls. After serving as a grief and trauma expert for over a decade, Dr. Ajita Robinson began to leverage her years of clinical experience and her previous career as a corporate consultant to launch a mental health practice and scaled it to 7 figures. She is a first-generation trauma and poverty disruptor who helps mental health entrepreneurs create living legacies and financial freedom while helping communities heal. So, without further ado, I give it back to Dr. Shayna Lewis and Dr. Ajita Robinson.
Yes, I am so excited for this conversation today, 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 today. Hello, 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 Dr. Robinson. How are you?
Hello. I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me with you all tonight.
Yes,
It is
absolutely.
such an interesting time that we're living in. Um,
Oh, yes, indeed. If that was a word, interesting is definitely one. We are in unprecedented times, are we not?
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
a time we've never seen before, a place many people have we don't have a point of reference for this. I mean, there's nothing
Yeah,
in our
I
life
think
that we've ever
absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the things that's creating that is kind of coming to I think to light for many of us
seen.
is the cumulative losses that we are experiencing collectively as
Hmm.
well as individually. And the ways that we generally navigate our losses aren't really accessible to us because
Hmm.
of needing to physically distance or stay at home orders for safety,
Right.
particularly those of us who are caregivers, whether we are professional caregivers, so mental health,
Hmm.
healthcare practitioners,
Hmm.
or we're caregiving in our families.
Hmm.
Um, we're generally not worried about our own safety while rendering care to others. And so that creates, it just creates additional stress,
It
right?
does.
Haven't even addressed the things that are happening in our country that continue to affect Black and Brown people, right? And
Hmm.
additional loss and trauma that we might be experiencing. And so all of those things are coming to bear.
Hmm.
Another big thing that is showing up is that many of us, I always talk about being a first generation poverty survivor as
Hmm.
well as a trauma disruptor, um, because many of us have utilized productivity as a trauma response or to keep our
Hmm.
loss history and our trauma history at bay. We stay,
Hmm.
whether it be with work or our kids or socializing, traveling, whatever, right? We're able to push it away and not have to address it on a day-to-day basis. Well, this situation has brought all of that to the forefront, and we might be feeling it in our bodies
Oh,
while
yeah.
able to name the thing that we're experiencing, right? And so we're
Exactly.
seeing the entire spectrum of that, from children all the way through our
Oh,
adult
yeah.
lives.
This is the thing that nobody is exempt from. Like no one. No, no amount of money is going to make you feel any different. No amount, I don't care how big your house is, how fancy your car is. I don't care how many folks you have in nothing makes you exempt.
That's
Nothing.
right. It is a universal.
It
Yep.
is.
It's
And
100% opt-in.
that right, exactly. Just got out. And so what's interesting about that for me is the fact that, and of course, in our lifetime, we've not ever seen this, most of us. Although I do know that the Spanish flu happened, and there are some folks who are still alive on the tail end of that who have experienced something similar. But the vast majority of us are new to this pandemic situation. But with
Hmm.
that said, it means we are all in the throes at the same time. So those, especially like those who are helpers, such as ourselves, who
Yes.
are called and designed to help are
Yes.
also in the same trauma that all of the
Absolutely.
rest of the world is in. So when you think about grief, depression, anxiety, loss,
Yes.
we're all experiencing it
That's
on
right.
so many different levels.
On so many different levels. And what's happening is so for the first time really in a really long time in my career, so 9/11 was probably one of the first times.
Hmm.
Katrina, and then a few other kind of public events brought a lot of these things to light, and we
Hmm.
were talking about them globally, or at least as a society, right? And then we got back to day to day. This is the
Hmm.
long period of time where we've been talking about it from a prolonged period because it has
Hmm.
been going on, right? And the other thing about grief, but also trauma, right?
Hmm.
Very nature, at its most simplistic level, trauma is about a loss of safety, whether it is
Yes.
emotional, physical, psychological,
Hmm.
financial. It is a loss of safety, right?
Hmm.
And we are experiencing a global sense of overwhelm to our
Hmm.
system simultaneously while being expected to produce at the same level,
Right.
right? And whether we're getting that message around producing externally or internally,
Yeah.
right?
Very
We're
true.
expecting a lot of ourselves because we
Right.
just want a sense of normality. In a
Yeah.
war world that we no longer feel like we can predict or we understand or we have any control. And so
None.
doing it, we're acting on ourselves, right? And so I have seen so many conversations where we're talking about, well, my sleep is, I'm not sleeping well, but
Mhm.
so there's that heightened activation and engagement. And there's no break in between our day. If we're working from home with kids or without,
Yeah.
right? We then go right back into whatever our personal demands are. There's no
Mhm.
break. And I think we take for granted how much we need that transition and how it actually benefits us when we have it.
Yeah.
I know some of my parents are struggling. My therapy skills do not work on my kids.
They go out the
I
window.
think they're immune, right? I think that exposure rate from birth has made them immune or something.
Yeah, I don't hear any of it. That's so funny. I love
And then
that.
this 4-year-old it just doesn't work for him or in the same way. And so all of that, right, is showing up. So having the expectation that we're able to bear witness and hold space for others, do our work and do this other thing, whether it be, being a partner or adult child, whatever. Those are all things that are acting upon us when our resources are low, right?
Very, very low. Now, let me ask you, because you said a mouthful right there. And one of the things that you talked about is that in the midst of all of this that we're experiencing, there's still an expectation of productivity, of
Yes.
whatever that looks like. Because for those who are still able to work, because we understand that there is a segment of the population that has lost their jobs, have been laid
Yes.
off or furloughed, or in different formats. But for those that have to still show up and go to work every day, they still expect you to perform at the same level that you did before this happened. Your kids really, the fact that you're stressed, anxious, depressed, or whatever, they honestly don't really care, because they are still expecting.
And they see that you're at home, right? And so
so that means you got more
available. That's right.
That's completely more
That's
time.
right.
So we're talking about living in this world that feels so overwhelming, extremely overwhelming. It's so overwhelming. And when you live in a world that's this overwhelming, our systems at times can actually get to a place where they almost want to shut down on us. How many of you on the line, and let us know if you're just tuning in, you're tuning in to help healing everyday life problems in a COVID-19 world. I'm Dr. Shana D. Lewis. I'm one of the co-hosts of this summit, and we're talking tonight with a specialist and expert, Dr. Ajetta Robinson, who is a grief expert in so many different ways. And she's going to help us with some different things. But I want you guys in the chat box to just check in and let us know, what has been your experience as you've been going through this COVID-19 world for the last 60 some odd days. I told y'all the other day, I really am not counting, but I know that we're here for 60 some odd days because my kids are telling me. They say TikTok is counting, so TikTok knows. I don't know, but we're in about 60 days. So let us know what your experience is and how has depression, anxiety, or grief has affected you. What I know for sure is that so many people have lost loved ones as a part of this process. So that's a whole nother level of loss that people are experiencing. That is the real physical loss, right? So you have the physical losses that occur. And you mentioned this earlier. You also have the symbolic losses, I think is what you called it. Did I get that right?
That is correct.
And so that's, of course.
Absolutely. So physical losses are the ones that we most readily kind of recognize. So they might be that a loved one has died, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could also be the physical loss of, let's say, a limb, right? And so there's a physical thing, tangible thing that we have lost.
Mm-hmm.
Symbolic losses are ones that actually are being amplified right now. We experience them on a regular basis, but we're experiencing so many that now we're recognizing that we're grieving, right? And so the symbolic losses are the intangible losses. And so they might be loss of identity.
Mm-hmm.
It could be loss of income,
Mm-hmm.
right? It could then translate into loss of our home, which is a physical loss, right?
Loss. Yep.
It is. So that loss of financial stability, the loss of safety, again, a lot of people, we know that we have had an increase in abuse reports, right? As for children, as well as intimate partner violence, that's a loss of safety. that we feel safe. We don't feel like we can go.
And so when you feel all of these different losses of physical things and emotional things, here's the thing that happens to us. We experience them. While they may look different, they can be experienced emotionally in the very same way. So kind of like for us here in Houston, we had the experience of some hurricanes, in the last couple of years. Hurricane Harvey was a great one that we all had several years ago. And I had clients that would come to see me that would say, Dr. Shana, I'm struggling. I've had this loss. It was a hurricane in that situation. And other people would say, well, what's the big deal? It's just things, right? So your house flooded. So why are you acting like you really lost something you can't replace? Those are things. And so people were almost shamed or guilted and really bad because they felt some intense grief or loss because of those what people call things. So, I mean, I guess go ahead and you were explaining that some more, but I think that's something that happens often, and we don't equate those losses with being as equally as emotional as physical losses.
And they trigger a grief response. And it can be the same type of response as a physical loss because the body doesn't know what the trigger is, what the stressor is, what the loss is. It just feels that activation, that sadness, that depression, the anxiety in the body. And so the response is the same, whether it's a physical or symbolic loss. And so we really have to stop comparing losses, measuring whether or not we've lost enough to indicate a grief response. I think another thing that that's also happening that we are recognizing, but we may not recognize that our kids are grieving. So the loss of the milestones, right? The loss of their identity as students and being able to have a place where they can go and have autonomy and they can go and they can be, learn new things, engage with their friends, the loss of that kind of network. That's a big part of their development and their identity. And they are the most acted upon powerless group, right? Our kids and our elders. Right. And so they are grieving the loss of those milestones, what they thought their senior year would be, what graduation would look like. Their sports events, there's, debates, all of those things.
All of that. Senior skip day. I mean,
all of it. Yeah. Spirit week. These are things that they look forward to, right? The kind of norming and storming and having a separate identity from their parents. All of that comes in, through school, right? Through socialization, through experimenting and figuring out who they are. And that really feels like it's paused. And they've been forced to learn in a way that doesn't actually benefit them in many cases, is not aligned with their learning style, right?
No, because they're all thrown into it like, what? We're supposed to be online talking to for kids who are homeschooled already, so this wasn't a shock to their system, obviously. But
from a socialization perspective, it has been, because that's a big part of the homeschool community, right?
Well,
is to be able to socialize.
You don't get to do that. Folks. That's a good point. That's a good point. So, but the kids who are in traditional school, they have the loss on two levels, because now you lose the day-to-day contact you had all the time with friends and teachers and just going to a school every day. Right? You think about that being a huge part, what you describe of their identity, and people aren't calling that a loss. And it is a huge loss.
It's a huge one. The loss of routine, right? The loss of thrive. We actually thrive when we know what to expect. Even if the plan changes. And so I can't see whose name it is, but someone's talking about their increased anxiety due to uncertainty. This is one of the biggest things that we're all experiencing, because even as we're trying to make plans and move forward, we don't have enough data, right? Or the data we're not sure if we can trust it. And so that means that we're uncertain about, can we make decisions for ourselves? And do we trust the decisions that are being made that impact our safety and our stability?
Now, that's a good thing, because we don't get to control half of that.
A lot of it we don't get to control. And we know that there's so many folks who are left in the gap. They were in the shadows in the gap before. They aren't even being recognized in this. They are so disproportionately impacted, and there's no outlet for them. There's no space like this that's even accessible to have the conversation to say, that's what I'm experiencing. The other thing that's happening is that loss is cumulative, especially if we haven't had an opportunity. It's cumulative in general. The
Right.
impact of cumulative loss really depends on whether or not we have resolved previous losses.
Okay.
And so for some of us, we kind of just got busy and we didn't actually do the active work of grief. And so that
Mm,
unresolved stuff is coming right up.
got
Those
it.
triggers, and I think one of the big things that we mistake in our grief journey is that there will come a time point in which the grief won't be so heavy, right? Or the
Mm,
over. And that's actually not how grief works. There's no time. And we
mhm.
say all the time, we hear it all the time, that it just takes time. It doesn't. Grief is an active, full body process. It
Mhm.
requires work, but what grief looks like on the other end of
Yeah.
immense suffering and anger and denial and all of the pain is finding meaning post loss,
Right.
right?
Right.
And many of us don't do that work because we have to go back and be productive and to, take care of our kids and to be
Right.
responsible, earn money. So there's no time
Right.
for that,
No.
right?
And someone mentioned that too. Sanji made the point when we were talking earlier about this work that we have to do, the productivity. I'm gonna show her comment. This is a good one. You are not working from home. You are at your home during a crisis trying to work. I,
That's
I
correct.
need this on my social. She read it on her social media, and I think it's an important distinction. Absolutely. And so when you're describing that the active grief process requires us, entire body to be engaged. If we're doing this correctly, we don't have the energy or time to do it because you're working at home in the middle of a crisis and trying to maintain the stuff around you. So literally, this stuff gets put on a shelf because
Your body is saying, no, ma'am,
right,
right?
right. So you're trying to do it here, but this thing is like, girl, we're not doing that today. I'm feeling it. I am feeling all
Yes.
of it.
And we know it because we don't often talk about we talk about the depression part of grief,
Mhm.
but we don't talk about the anxiety related aspects of how grief manifests,
Yeah,
right? And so again, grief also is about loss, physical and symbolic,
right.
and not knowing what life looks like after the loss. And we have lost a lot. We've lost our day to day,
Yeah.
and we are literally sitting in a space. We don't know when it's going to end. We don't know what this new normal is going to look like. I think we've all understand that it can't go back to the way that it was, right? We are fundamentally changed, even if we try to kind of pull whatever we used to be life back into
Mhm.
this space. We are fundamentally different, right? We know things about ourselves. We've experienced too much to just go back, right?
Mhm.
And that also means that we're in uncharted territory once again, and that
Yes,
is very anxiety provoking, and
yes.
it's right alongside that grief journey. And so it is no wonder that your sleep quality is disrupted.
Oh yeah.
It is no wonder that that our sleep schedules are completely off, right? I can't tell you how many folks I'm like, oh, one of my kids woke up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and so now I'm up, and I'm like, all right, so I'm on Facebook. All of my friends are online, and I'm like,
Exactly.
right?
What's a bedtime now? Like, because the kids are always asking, can we just do an all night? We ain't got nowhere to go tomorrow. So what are you talking? Well, it's still kind of a school night, right? You kids kind of get up and
Yeah.
do it. And you're right. And I'm thrown off. Everybody is thrown completely off. Whatever we knew to be the case is no longer the case. There is not one area of life that looks remotely like it did before. It's not even recognizable. I said the other day, I feel like I'm walking around in some foreign land, like a foreign country, and I'm visiting, right? Like I'm the visitor,
Sure.
and I just showed up. I don't speak the language. I don't understand the customs. I don't understand any of these things because it is foreign to us. And so many folks are paralyzed as a result of that, right? That anxiety of the unknown, the uncertainty, which we don't get to because we can't affect change and where this thing goes as far as a health pandemic. We don't get to decide that.
Yeah.
But I guess what I want to focus on for a minute here, Dr. Robinson, is what are the parts of this that we can control? So if I'm feeling this anxiety, and I have some folks who are talking about experiencing some anxieties and losses and that kind of thing, what pieces of this do we get to control? What does that look like? And what do we need to be doing to help ourselves?
Yeah, so I think that it is important to acknowledge not only that we name the things that we're trying to heal from, that is super important. So naming losses, Also identifying what is it that you need that is accessible, that we
Okay.
can be creative around, buffering this loss. It is
Okay.
so important, right? And so, yeah, we may not be able to go in. I like to lay eyes on people, particularly when they're grieving, and I can't do that.
Mhm.
I can't go show up at their house and bring them
Yeah.
food and, lean on them and, things of that nature. But I can FaceTime them, right? I can connect with them. I can check in with them. Uh,
Hmm.
Creating some of those rituals are an important aspect of mourning, as an important aspect of loss culturally from a societal perspective. And so, what are some of those things that we generally do that are a part of our morning routine, right? Mourning, MOUR.
Yeah. Right. That IND, that one. Okay. Yeah.
Not good morning, right?
Right.
I had to think about that. That we can incorporate, right? That we can do. And so, how do we create community? And it is so important that we do that. How do we lean into our community? And so that's going to be important. You can create a rhythm, because a schedule or a routine may not be something that feels accessible, but a new rhythm might be something that you feel that you can do. And it really just requires that you lean in and say, what do I need in this moment?
Okay.
And sometimes that is to be still on purpose, and not because your body has said, we're done, right? Because that's a
Mhm.
thing that we're seeing happening, where you
Yep.
push yourself, and
Yep.
then you wake up and your body's like, I'm not doing any of that.
Nope.
We
I'm.
get motivated and we
Yep.
feel like, oh, this was a down day. No, your body literally said, you have pushed me and you will not stop, so I will. And
Yeah.
so, how do we do that without getting to that boundary?
Right.
And that is listening to the rhythm of your body. The body tells you, it keeps the score. Those of us who are
Yeah.
trauma therapists knows that it is such a mind body, right,
Mhm.
experience, well before we are able to put words and
Yeah.
language to it.
Yeah.
So
It shows
pay
up.
attention, right? Your anxiety sits somewhere in your
Mhm.
body.
Mhm.
Give it what it needs. It may be good nutrition, it might be
Yeah.
rest, it might be a walk, it may be just to watch a show that, particularly for us as therapists, that you're unlikely to analyze, right? That allows you to
And that's
shut.
tough. It has to be a
Listen,
mindless show about a bunch of nothing in order for us to
Listen,
go
and
there.
I am all about Marvel Comics because
Yeah,
it gives
there
me
you go.
what I need. I'm less likely to analyze superheroes, but there's,
Yes, yes,
there's some inclination there to
yes,
do it. However,
yes.
I've given myself permission to watch shows that I do not have the inkling to kind of
To
analyze,
do.
right? And I watch them with my kids. So I really
Right.
like cartoons.
Yes.
Trolls was a great movie if you haven't seen it. Things like that give you permission to just shut it down,
Yeah.
right? Boundaries are your best friend. I think because we are at home, people think that we're accessible, but you may
Mm,
need to not be accessible,
mm,
right? I have had people wanting to process um, this recent incident that we had, right?
mhm.
Um, and as a traumatologist and a grief therapist, they wanted to talk about, the race-based trauma and how
Mhm.
that is showing up. And I couldn't do that with them yesterday.
Yeah.
And I had to just say it. And it was a friend. It wasn't a client
Right.
or someone wanting to consult, but
Right.
another therapist friend. And I was like, listen, I can't do this with you today.
Got you.
And to be okay with setting that
Listen.
boundary. The people who are irritated by your boundaries are the ones who benefit from you not having any.
Wait,
And
wait.
so
You got
keep
to
that
stop right
peace.
there because I'm gonna need you to repeat that for the
Yep.
people in the back, because
Yes.
boundaries is a real thing. And you're right. A lot of times we don't think we have a right or permissions to
That's
have
right.
them, because we train people, first of all,
That's
how
right.
not to respect them from us. Say that
Yep.
one more time. Y'all need to be writing this in the chat box. Go ahead.
Yes,
Repeat
for
that.
sure. So people who are irritated by your boundaries are the ones who benefit from you not having any. And that
Oh,
is
that's
so,
so good.
so important. It
That's
is
so
so
good. Did y'all
important.
catch that? I want to see in the chat box if y'all, because one of the things about right now that makes it more overwhelming for many people is because what you just described, people assume because you don't have a commute anymore and you're at home,
Yes.
23 out of 24 hours, perhaps out of a day, and you're sitting
Yes.
in your office or your dining room table all day, you just all of a sudden have all of this extra time. And so
And you
I am teaching people it's not extra time. You have the
it
same
isn't.
24 hours in a day. what we are able to do now is commit our time differently than what we did before. Before, I had to commit it to 2.5 hours in the car to get to
That's
the
right.
job. Before, I
That's
had
right.
to go to the grocery store for that. Now I do Instacart, honey. I don't even want to go to no grocery stores no more. So you get to choose differently how you use your time, and having a boundary of time is so easy. I mean, I was teaching that the other day because it is huge, but
It is.
people will only do that what you allow them to. So when you create the boundary, you don't create anything that you are not willing to maintain and keep, because you can say it and then you show up and they can do whatever they want to, be like, they're not going to believe nothing you say. So think about that very carefully, what you decide your boundary is. That is so good. I'm glad they're saying, say it again. Agreed. Wow, they like that. That was a good one.
Yeah.
That was a good one. Like, that's
And we have to give ourselves permission to
do
have those
so.
boundaries, because
Yes.
boundaries, I think, get a bad rap, but boundaries are protective. They
Yes.
are about self-care,
Yes.
right? And it allows you to model for people that they don't always have to be available either, right? And so sometimes they need you to set that tone, right?
Yes.
And it's not about punishing people or restricting access. It's about saying, listen, I want, particularly as those of us who are helping to take care of other people,
Yes.
I want to be able to not serve from an empty cup. I want to be able to serve from my overflow. And I can't
Right.
do that if I'm constantly accessible. Right. And so not even a full cup. I want to serve from my overflow.
You want to
And
be
so
in the
if we
social
do
life.
that, I want to be, listen, I want to be able to, exactly, over in abundance, which means that I will always have enough to give as well as for me.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so take that piece as it is self-care, so you can commit to whatever this thing is, whether it be the relationship, caregiving for your parent, your kids, whatever. You're modeling for them that none of that matters if you aren't first whole as much as you can be. I think the other thing that is that just keeps showing up is that we do have the same amount of time, but we don't have the same energy. Right? We don't have the same. Many of us are experiencing difficulties in concentration, difficulties in productivity, difficulty in memory, even is impacted, right? All of that can be related to anxiety, stress, depression, grief. And so we don't have the same available as far as resources and reserves because we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? And so even though we have more hours and more time, it doesn't mean that we can do the same things that we did before. And it is so important that you advocate for yourself, whether it be with your employer or your spouse or your kids even, right? That you advocate that I've actually learned that I don't want to work the way that I was working before. Many of us were working in ways that overextended us, again, whether it be work outside the home or in the home or whatever. We were doing more at a pace that actually wasn't sustainable, but we had built-in breaks. I know that I'm not the only one that in the beginning of the year, I was like, all right, I just got to make it to spring break because then I get to go on vacation, right? I get to travel or whatever. You knew that it was an unrealistic standard. And yet, because we knew when we would get a break from it, we just pushed through until then. I can't wait until summer when school's out. I can't wait until Easter. I can't wait until the holiday. We were waiting for a 4-day weekend to reset. But we were willing to be fatigued the entire time. There is no space for reset.
Listen.
You gotta claim it.
Just wait. You listen. Wait. Like are y'all catching this? We got somebody. I love this comment. This is a good one. We got to put this one on. Angie P said, "Ooh, child, yes. Listen. So here's the thing. So you describe not just the fact that it's not about time necessarily. It's about energy. And I love that you brought that up because we don't calculate that. Like that doesn't get factored in by people around you. The idea is where you just got all this time, or I see you more, or whatever the case might be. But energy is critical because everything we do is energy. You know, whatever movements we make, we're exchanging energy all of the time. And when you have spent all that you have, what exactly do you have to work from? I call that negative E, like you on less than nothing, trying to show up in the world that you can't even really produce, be productive, or interact with in a way that actually is beneficial to anybody. So you end up burning yourself out completely while you're waiting on this 4-day weekend to happen.
That's
That
right.
we don't really get in a true sense now because we are all here in this thing together. So that
Yes.
is really, really, really major. Y'all think about energy. Think about the fact that you have to protect that for yourself. Other
That's right.
people are going to take from you what they need, but you have to be the one allowing it to be spent in order for it to be taken from you. So here's the thing, just real quick, if you just joined us, you are watching Help Healing in Everyday Life Problems in a COVID-19 World. I am Dr. Shana D. Lewis, and I am on the line with Dr. Ajetta Robinson, and she is, honey, she is killing all of the topics this evening about what we need to do to help ourselves deal with grief, depression, anxiety, and the loss that are all happening in this COVID-19 world. And I just said her name wrong. It's Ajita, and I know that. I said,
No, you said it right the first time. You said it right the first time, Ajetta.
So listen, I'm so excited right now. This is such good stuff. If you have questions, please put them in the chat.
Yeah.
She's an expert on these things, and she has a lot of great things to share. So take the time now, if you have questions, to please put them here in the chat. Okay, so we're talking about folks being able to actually take some controls back, right? One of the things you said earlier that I really resonated with me was you used the word rhythm. And that it's not necessarily about creating a schedule and all these kind of things, but you described it as a rhythm. And I don't think we consider it that way, right? Because we think rhythm is dancing, right? Like that's all it is. But really, there is a rhythm to life. There's a rhythm to being an individual. And when you're in the midst of anxiety provoking situations, we all are. COVID-19 is a trauma that we are all collectively experiencing in our own individual ways, but at the same time. And so everyone's reaction might look different because where I was sitting at the time it happened may be different from where you were. So my response might look different. So you can't judge anybody from where they are right now because you don't know where I was before we showed up here. Like, don't do that.
That's right. That is
so talk more about the rhythm and how we can create the rhythm and as it relates to managing the anxiety, the depressions, these losses. And then we're going to deep dive into grief in the COVID-19 world right now and specifically.
Absolutely. So I think, we all have an internal rhythm. Mm-hmm. And I think that we negate our ability to recognize that because we start off our day with our to-do list, or we start off our day checking social media or our email. That automatically puts you on someone else's rhythm because usually in your email, people are in your email saying, hey, can I do this for you? They're asking you for something. And so how you start your day has to be about just recognizing what you are needing, what rhythm. You wake up with your rhythm. Right? Okay. You wake up with either inspiration or excitement, or I know I have to get through the day. All of those things kind of shape your rhythm, but you know when you're offbeat. You can feel it. You feel it in your body. You know when you're offbeat, whether you're dancing to a song or you're just moving throughout your day. You know when you've rushed into your day, you feel the weight of that. Right? Yes. That is your rhythm. When you know that you haven't, it's 2:00, I have a headache, and you realize you haven't eaten anything and you haven't had any water, your rhythm is off because you haven't given your body what it needs. And so if you slow down enough, right, and you have an opportunity in each waking moment to just slow down and listen to what your body needs. You feel it in your joints, in your shoulders, because you've been sitting at the computer all day. Do something else, right? Yeah. Give yourself a break, right? Just listen. And it's, so for me, it's hard to say, Shana, you should do this, right? Because I don't know what your body is asking you, but I can teach you to listen. We talk about body scanning, right? And so your grief is your anxiety. Mine is held in my stomach. Where's yours? When I ask clients that question, they're almost always able to tell me, right? If you just sit and you bring up that anxiety that's likely with you anyway, where's your body holding it?
So you got to pay attention to that. Got it.
You have to pay attention. And the cool thing is that you can teach kids what their rhythm is. We teach kids mindfulness. We teach kids how to body scan all the time. What is your tummy telling you, right? We teach them that when it's time for them to take a nap. All of those things we recognize, but we label it for them. You can tell them how to do it themselves. And so pay attention to your own rhythm. Sometimes your rhythm is saying, I need another person because I know that I'm not motivated on my own. Right? And so I do things like I have group calls with some of my friends or even some of my consulting clients, and I put them in a Zoom room together, and we just like, we're on mute, but we're working. I just need another person to hold space with me,
I love
right?
that.
We call them
Okay.
power hours, right? And so
Yeah,
in the
that's
beginning of the
cool.
hour, I say, okay, I'm doing this thing that I really don't want to do for the next 45 minutes. And then I get to talk to you all for the last 15 minutes. And that will give me, it bookends the undesirable thing, right?
I love it.
And so we have the freedom of doing that now that we're home. But as it
Yes.
relates to your sleep schedule,
Yeah.
you actually do need a routine around sleep because you
Mm-hmm.
have to remind the body that it's time to go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, scanning your body and identifying what you're holding on to. This is why it's so important to label the thing that's creating the anxiety,
Okay.
or creating the grief, or manifesting the depression. If we
Mm-hmm.
can label that, then we can build support around it. And so you might find that the grief shows up at the nighttime, right? When it's time to go to bed, but it's often when you're the most still. And it makes
Mm-hmm.
sense from that perspective because the body thinks, oh, you slow down, so you're now available to tackle this memory or
Right,
tackle this
right,
feeling, right? It
right,
doesn't know, like, okay, like, yeah, you need to sleep. However,
right.
like, I caught you while you had a break, right?
Exactly.
And so
Yes.
it's trying to do the work because literally the body is storing those neural pathways, right? The triggered
Mhm.
memory or the trauma memory or the grief memory, and it's storing it in the brain, but it's tied to those emotions that show up for you in those moments. And so it doesn't know that when you're sad, that sadness is only related to your kid going to the other co-parent's house. It doesn't know. It
Yeah.
just recognizes how it shows up in the body, and so it
Mm-hmm.
wants to do that work, right? And so if you don't do it, it'll do it for you.
Yeah.
And it catches you off guard every time, and so it's
Wow.
disrupting our sleep. If we think about, most of the time when I ask clients, well, what were the thoughts that you remember either from that disrupted sleep or when you first wake up in the morning? That's usually
Mm-hmm.
the work that you didn't do before you went to bed. And
Mm-hmm.
so if it's the to-do list, or as I like to call the undone list, right? All the things that we
Not the to
didn't get
do, but the
done,
undone. Yes, right.
that undone list of all the things that we were supposed to do that we haven't done, that's hanging out there,
Yeah,
do
right.
something with it, right? And so whether it is doing a dump list on a piece of paper, or I like to do voice memos, so that I know, you can literally tell your brain, I'm
Yeah.
recognizing this is undone, but I have a plan to do it. So your body can say, okay, that's been addressed, right? And it will
Mm-hmm.
allow that running list, or whatever the thing is that keeps
Right.
running, it can quiet and allow you to get some rest. But the other
Right.
reality is that you might actually need to tell the story of what you're holding on to, particularly
Okay.
around your grief.
Mm.
The thing that's unresolved in this loss, particularly in the COVID world,
Mm-hmm.
is if we physically lost someone, that we couldn't be with them, right? That
Right.
we didn't have an opportunity to say goodbye. And so you might need to write a letter to your loved one. You might
Mm.
need to journal about what you're feeling. You might need your nighttime routine to connect with somebody that loved this person too. Your
Two. Yeah.
rhythm and your grief cycle, right? What your individual grief process will guide you. And if you're not sure, reach out to a professional, right? That you trust, to
Right.
help you figure out what a grief process looks like for you. There's
Wow.
no wrong way to do it, but you got to do it, right?
Wow.
Um,
Dr. Robinson, just wait. Listen, like, are y'all catching this? There are 100% agree, 1,000 times over. Love this, love this, love this. Got a question for. Let's pop this question on the
mm,
screen. Let's answer this one. What do you do if you cannot get another person? Because you described if you need another person, if that's what your rhythm is calling for. What is the alternative? She agrees with you 100%. What would you say?
it depends on what the task is, right? So if it's work and you can't find another person, right, that's in your company, we're on
Mm-hmm.
Facebook, we're on social media. There are people all
Mm-hmm.
over the world who
Yep.
will reach out and say, I'll hop on Zoom with you, right? I'll hop
Mm-hmm.
on. So it doesn't have to be someone that you know, but be clear in what
Mm-hmm.
you're requesting, right? And
Okay.
have some discernment, because everyone's not for you. They don't need to be in your space. And so
Right.
do that piece. I would be surprised if you don't have someone on your Facebook page or your social media or your
Mm-hmm.
church or whatever. It doesn't have to be that 1 degree, right, of your
Mm-hmm.
close circle. It could
Right.
be in that second or third one that can connect you with someone willing to hold space with you. right?
That's good.
To say, hey, and I put on social media that I had Netflix parties, and people that I didn't have a relationship with that were friends on Facebook
Showed
showed
up to
up.
the party.
Right? Or showed up to the party, and we're in the comment section. I'm like, oh, Netflix party gives you permission to talk through the movie. Let's be clear
Yeah.
about what happens there. Right?
Right.
And it was a nice it was nice feeling connected
Right.
and getting to know folks, and we had a movie interest. I told them what movie we were going to watch. People who were interested in action movies signed up
Joined
to
in.
come, right?
Yes.
So we had that thing in common. And so it just depends on what it is that you need. There are support groups that are happening all over the country.
True.
Ask. Feel free to reach out to me if you need to be connected, right? It just depends on what it is. I know that for work, because I'm self-employed, and I only worked out of the house. I worked out of the house except for one day a week anyway, and so it was really easy for me to kind of be in my own little silo. And
Uh-huh.
I wasn't used to these kids being home. However,
Right.
so I needed other adult conversation that wasn't trauma related, right? And
Yeah.
so I intentionally sought out people that it's like, no, so we're not talking about that. And
Cannot.
in this meeting, I am not
Yes.
teaching and I am not expert. I do not want to be on.
I'm
I
just me
just want
right now
people.
without that.
That is
Right.
it, right? That
Right.
is it. And so that's a boundary and setting expectations
Yeah.
and being willing to name your need.
I love that.
Be
And so
willing
you
to
even
name
said
it.
earlier, naming the thing that the grief is. What is the
Yes.
loss? Naming
What is
it.
it?
Like the saying is name a thing a thing. Like you can't do anything
Yes.
about a thing if you haven't called it a thing.
That's right.
Otherwise, it's just this ambiguous whatever that does
That's
not
right.
have any substance that you can do something with. So that's so, so, so important. One of the things that I want to make sure we address, because I have seen so much in the media, in the news about the increase in depression that results in suicide. And so, and matter of fact, earlier today, I teach, and one of my students this morning was saying that there was someone in their world that actually died by suicide recently. And not the only story that I've heard that was recent. And there was what they knew, no other signs or symptoms of such, and felt like it was really related to the COVID-19 world, this isolation. I've seen that with young people as well, dying by suicide because of this isolation and the uncertainty and those kind of things. What would you say to that? Because how does someone even know if what they're feeling is, or someone they love is that severe that it could even lead to that place? What can we do about that? Because we can't change the world we're in right now, but what can we do related to those things?
The number one thing that we can do is ask them. And don't say, are you thinking about hurting yourself? You have to ask the question, are you thinking about suicide?
Mm-hmm.
You have to ask them the question, and we got to get around this. We got to dispel this myth that asking about it provokes or contributes to it. It does not, right? And to remember that most people who die by suicide, they don't actually want to die. Mm-hmm. They want the pain to stop. And so if we can understand what's contributing to the pain, again, we can provide support around it. The isolation alone isn't the thing. Right? It's the pre-existing factors, their mental health before COVID happened, and the overwhelming pain that they are experiencing with no hope of escape. That is what this COVID situation is compounding. It's because we don't know when it's going to end. And we may not have people in our world who are actually willing to be with us when we're not okay. They need for us to be okay because they don't know what to do when we're not.
We're not okay.
Remember that them not being okay isn't about you. It is not about you, and you have to be willing to allow them to express that they're not feeling like this is not a good day. I'm feeling this pain. I'm feeling hopeless. I'm feeling sad without trying to immediately fix them. Right?
Exactly.
They need coping strategies and coping mechanisms, but what often happens is we just distract them. We get them
as opposed to really talking about what's really going on. How do you really
handle? Because we don't understand it. We can't handle them not being okay and the thought of them not wanting to be here. So we can't stay in the conversation. right? And
So
so
what
that
would
is
you say to
important.
the person that's on the line who may be feeling that themselves? So it's me. I'm feeling this heavy weight. I'm feeling the compounded nature of COVID-19. I was already emotionally in a vulnerable space. This exacerbated that which I already was suffering with and from. What can I do?
I would ask you, what do you feel you need?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
ask you, what are the things, because there's even in the midst of suffering, there's something that still works, right? And so, what are the things that you still can find joy in? And we're going to
Mm-hmm.
build that in. Who are the
Mm-hmm.
people in your life that you would be heartbroken to leave? And let's
Mm-hmm.
make sure that they understand that you are something. If we don't have those people, are we willing? What other resources can we put in place, right? And so
Yeah.
part of the piece that's really big is that people feel alone and they feel unseen and unheard. And so they
Yes.
think that they're suffering alone. And we have to remind people that these feelings, if we can remind them that most of the time they don't feel that way all day. So look for the
Right.
gaps. And how do
Mm-hmm.
we cultivate that? Let's hold on to those moments of joy, the moments where
Mm-hmm.
we don't feel numb, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and to connect them with folks that can help stabilize those emotions, right? And so they might,
Yes.
if we can get them to agree to a mood stabilizer, right? Get them
Mm-hmm.
to agree to doing some group kind of work, get them some
Mm-hmm.
socialization. All
Mm-hmm.
of those things are really, really helpful. What are the things that they already draw on? Because again, looking for the thing that works. And so for many of my clients who have been in this very space, their faith and their family are the two biggest resources that we
Right.
build around them like nobody's business, because it's the
Right.
thing that they can't stay here for themselves because the pain is that great. They can do it for someone else. And I'm willing to external until we can build it in house. Right?
Right, right. We can start outside and build on the inside as we
Yes.
go.
And build it
And the
right
biggest,
on in.
the biggest thing I want to make sure folks understand is that you don't have to do this alone. It is, and that's
You do
part of
not.
that helplessness, that hopelessness, that there is, this is all I
Yes.
have. Like this is the only outcome, the only possibility. This is all of it. When in reality, it's not, and you don't have to carry the weight alone. That's so, so, so important. There's lots of resources around that. And I
That's right.
we'll talk about some resources that you have in just a little bit. We're 10 minutes
Mhm.
is what we have left. When I tell you time flies by
Just
so fast, it is insane. Okay, so now let's go specifically to the conversation about what loss looks like of an individual right now. You alluded to that earlier. I'm realizing that, and even Dr. Whitaker talked about, the numbers of folks who have COVID-19 is massive. The number of people who've actually been lost to it is massive. And so folks are in a space of grieving that looks completely different. What kinds of things can, and everyone who's passing right now is not passing because of COVID either. Folks are
right.
still dying of other, health causes,
Yes.
accidents, and other things as
Right.
well too. But at the end of it all, the grieving, physical grieving that we can do or mourning we can share with other people looks different. How would you recommend folks approach that? What do we do if we've lost someone and we can't go to a funeral? We can't go over to the house. I mean, what are you suggesting folks do to handle that?
And so utilizing technology to your advantage is going to be so
Mm-hmm.
important. And so whether it be the phone or FaceTime or these Facebook groups, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen memorial services live streamed.
Mm-hmm.
We can plan the in-person event with flexibility because we may not know when our state is going to open or when that will actually be allowed. But what are the
Mm-hmm.
things? I always ask clients to identify the rituals that are in. So what does it actually mean in your culture, in your family, when a loved one dies? What are the things that you will normally do to memorialize or honor their life, right? And how do
Mm-hmm.
we add creativity and technology to help us do that task? Because I imagine there are things that you can do from a distance. It doesn't feel the same, but we know that that is
Mm-hmm.
delayed. Also,
Yeah.
understanding that sometimes for many of us, going through that process, that memorial that may happen on a later date, um, one, planning that can give us a sense of purpose and meaning, but
Mm-hmm.
that the process of meaning, of being able to make meaning of the loss, can happen in any space, right? Able to physically be
Mm-hmm.
together or not. And so what
Mm-hmm.
can you do today that might honor your relationship with your loved one?
That's a good
And
question. I
so
mean,
a
it's a good
lot
thought
of
process
times
to
those are
fun. Okay,
things that
Go
because
ahead.
that is one of the meaning making aspects of the grief process, that
Okay.
when we get through the denial and the anger and the bargaining and the shock, all of those pieces, and we're able to accept the reality of the loss, which COVID is compounding, because
Hmm.
oftentimes the reality of the loss is like it hits us at the funeral, which many of us aren't able to attend, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so for some, that is the live streaming of that event that makes it salient for us. And so when
Mm-hmm.
we're able to do that, know that if you have a physical or another memorial or service later on
Hmm.
when everyone can be together, it is both normal and natural that you will go back through whatever your grief journey is. It's called
Right.
retriggering, right? Or
Right.
regrieving. Um,
Okay.
and anniversaries, milestones, other events will send you right
Hmm.
back through that cycle. Um,
Gotcha.
the other piece to acceptance is also finding meaning in post the loss. And this
Hmm.
may be the piece that feels most inaccessible to us because we feel like
Hmm.
we've done the other pieces. And so, again, find the things that are actually unique and important in your culture and do those, right? So the
Right.
journaling, the letter writing, the community building, we have done no contact drop off of food because we know that that's a big piece in
Yeah.
honoring
The
the family
family.
of origin, the
Right.
nuclear family. Is that's a
Right.
part is making a dish and having it delivered, or ordering from a restaurant and having it delivered. We can still do
Hmm.
that level of caregiving and community building. We've had families who have had scheduled dinner together, right? And sat around their virtual table and told stories and played
Oh,
music
together.
to do
Okay.
that
Hmm.
less together. And they're online together. They
Hmm.
share pictures, they play games, the things that you would
Okay.
be doing at Igma's house or whomever, you can
Right.
in this online
Do
space
virtually.
and you need to.
Got
And
it.
so
So
give
what's really
permission
important
to
about
do
what
that.
Dr. Robinson is describing right now is she's literally giving you the stages of grief. That's what she just broke down. All of those are
Mm,
stages of the grief and loss process. And I think sometimes folks believe it's some linear kind of thing that you just run right through it. And it's not, because what you described is at some other point, if you are in a place to have a different kind of memorial or service, you may be re-triggered and you may go through this whole thing in 5 different ways
yeah.
all over again, which wouldn't be abnormal
Mhm.
in the space that we're in. So the grieving process will occur, but it looks different because, well, I guess in our mind eye, it looks different because we can't do the things the way we used to do them. But using
Yes,
technology, being creative, is an important thing to still honor the one that has been lost, for sure. And even
that's
those
right.
same stages, when we talked earlier about, the symbolic losses and the physical losses, apply as well in the way that we can work through this whole process of
That's right.
literally getting to the end and creating new meaning about what has been lost. And
Yes.
that is probably the heaviest piece of it all, perhaps for some, because it can take a long time to get to that place
It
to
can,
create some kind of meaning. Yeah.
but sometimes we get there rather quickly, right? And so, or we think we did. We get there, and so if
Um,
we've likely seen this because I recently had a Facebook friend. Her mom died, and she
mhm,
found great meaning in that her mother had a relationship with God, right? And she knew that
mhm,
she was no longer suffering, and so she's able to find meaning in understanding or believing what happened next for her mom. But she
mhm.
hasn't actually started the process of what life for her looks like without her
Looks
mother's
like
physical presence, right?
exactly.
And at some point, she will be able to, and this again is not defined by time, because we can flow
Mhm,
into and out of this space of being able to
mhm.
accept what life looks like for you without the
Right,
physical connection, because we realize that the relationship doesn't ever end, right?
right,
And so, if we're
right.
able to make meaning of that, sometimes it changes the way that we take care of ourselves. It changes or
Mm.
it gives us permission to actually do the job that we wanted to do, because we realize
Yeah.
that we only have today, and why are we
Uh-huh.
spending today in a job that we absolutely hate, right? And so
Absolutely.
sometimes it gives us a renewed way of
Yeah.
living our life, because we are
Yes.
so uniquely aware of how short it really is, right?
Absolutely.
um, And so we're very intentional. It might change the way that we have our diet or the way that we have time for our kids or our family,
Mhm.
a whole bunch of things. Foundations, literally foundations all over the world have been
Change.
created on the back end of loss and making meaning. So think about any of our
Mhm.
care foundations, any of our domestic violence foundations, all of
Yeah,
it came on the back end of loss and
yeah.
trying to make way for someone else who
Mm.
might have been experiencing that same loss or that same situation. And so we
Wow.
find new purpose in life, right?
Yes,
What life looks like. And so that is really, really important, but also
that
to
is.
understand that because you find new meaning doesn't make the loss any less important or impactful.
Mm-mm.
It
Mm-mm.
just means that you have found a different way to hold your grief, right? And
Exactly.
so it may no longer be a thing that destabilizes your day, right?
Mm-hmm.
It may
Mm-hmm.
be a thing that is a present part, but your ability to hold it, we've gotten comfortable, right? We have
Mm-hmm.
gotten not even comfortable, we have just adjusted to the weight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
even notice the weight on a day-to-day
Right,
basis. And then
right.
Thanksgiving rolls around or Mother's Day
And
rolls around,
then boom.
and it feels heavier than it
Yeah,
did the day before.
before.
Right?
Exactly.
Anniversary or the new milestone. I have a friend who's getting married and her father's no longer here.
Mm-hmm.
And the weight of that, it's been 22 years. And the
Right.
weight of that is
It's
more
heavier now than what it was.
than it was
Absolutely.
before, right? And that's
Absolutely.
also normal. And I'm emphasizing that because I hear way too often people say, I feel like I should be doing better now. I should be better now. Right?
Oh,
But it's a
yeah.
lifelong experience. It's a lifelong
Yeah.
experience. And sometimes we're coping better, right, than others, but grief amplifies, right? It amplifies
Mm.
the losses that we've experienced, the ones that that we've not resolved, and it can
Mm-hmm.
be amplified by the reduced resources that we have, which is what's happening for us today. We're being
Exactly.
taxed, and some
Oh, yeah.
people feel attacked on multiple levels, and
On
so
11,000 levels. Because what
right?
you just described is the cumulative grief and loss
Yes,
that many of us have had over a lifetime with
that's
things
right.
that we didn't even count as losses. And that's
That's
part
right.
of it because we
That
didn't
is
label this thing as a loss, this relationship that ended, this job that you got laid off from, this whatever, this house that you got put out of, whatever it might be. Add all of those things up, inserted inside of
right.
COVID-19 on top of it. If we've not dealt with any of those things, we're much more vulnerable right now
Yeah.
in this moment to all of the things that we've described. Listen, wow, this has been dynamic conversation. Do you guys understand? Like, I'm really big about bringing people who are smarter than me in the room about stuff. You understand why I brought y'all Dr. Robinson? She is brilliant, and you actually have written about this topic of grief and loss. Can you share about the resource that you have coming out very soon for that?
Absolutely. So I have actually a free workbook that's available right now. It's called it's a grief workbook, and the book that comes out next month, actually on the anniversary of my oldest brother's death
Mhm.
on June 9th. And so it's called The Gift of Grief, and it is navigating loss and finding meaning. Is the name of that book, and it really is about what we were talking about here. I've also written it in a way that is not just for clinicians. I wanted it to be for everyone, right? Because
Mhm.
none of us are exempt. And that is really, really important. We also have we've talked about grief in social media and how that can amplify. It also can be a great space for healing and community. We've talked about how grief and looks different for kids. We talk about
Mhm.
those physical and symbolic losses. And there's so many different types of grief. There's
Mhm.
complicated grief that I think our
Mhm.
first responders, our healthcare professionals,
Mhm.
traumatic grief, right? And those things that we are experiencing or that anyone can experience, being able
Mhm.
to recognize those things is so important. And so we have the workbook, which is a companion to the actual book to help you all navigate that process for yourself, but also for anyone that you love or that you might be working with. And so that is coming out next month in a few weeks.
So exciting. Now you said the okay, so there's a worksheet or workbook that's
Workbook,
available
yeah,
now. That's available
it's
now.
available. It is available
Is
right
that
now.
so the gift of grief, the Bitly grief workbook is where they can get the free workbook right now,
And
correct?
Correct. Also, we'll put you on the list to be notified when the
book comes out. Perfect.
comes
So
out.
make sure you guys all get that, share that link. Right now in this COVID-19 world, grief is something we are all experiencing, even if we didn't call it that.
That's right.
And I hope you understood that from what Dr. Robinson said tonight. We are all experiencing, our children are experiencing it. And I think as parents, if we don't give voice to what they're experiencing, they don't have words or language for this when they're very young. And even some of the big ones, they don't know what it is. They just know is whatever is happening. They don't have a word for it.
But they feel it in their body.
They feel it, exactly. The body keeps score. The body knows something is wrong. It doesn't feel good, that kind of thing. So we need to be able to allow them space to be able to have a conversation about what they're feeling and thinking. But we have to acknowledge our own first. I'm big about us doing our own work first, y'all. And if you follow me for any of the time, I say, do your work. Do your work, do your work. Dr. Robinson said at the top of this conversation, you have got to be willing and make space for you to do the work. And this is sometimes very heavy work, but it's necessary work if you want to live a life that you're able to actually thrive and not just survive. Because I feel like so many of us right now are just surviving. And you know, and that's a neurological thing. Survival is, you know, there's threats out here in this world. I'm just trying to get by and get through. But to literally thrive in the midst of a COVID-19 world is a possibility, doing the things that you described, which I think are beautiful. The rhythm, the boundaries. Y'all listen, the boundaries, that she gave a whole word on that. If y'all missed that, rewind the tape, because that was beautiful. And all of those things, great tips. A workbook for folks to access. How else might they reach out and connect to you, Dr. Robinson, if they want to connect to you?
Absolutely. So everything that you might want to know about me or find me is at ajetarobinson.com. My email is info@ajetarobinson.com. That's where I hang out. So all of my info is right there. So my first name, last name.com.
And I'm going to put that right here as well, too. Easy to find. It's all right here, the bit.ly for the book. And I also will put it in the comments. Are there any last questions for Dr. Robinson? She gave us quite a few things to think about tonight. This has been very, very, very educational, informative. I've learned a lot of things as well tonight. And one of the things I love about these conversations is that it gives you a new perspective. Because many times we think we know what it is, but like when you describe it a different way, like, oh, so that's what that is. Let's flip that thing around. Looking at that wrong. And so that's the value in having conversations. So that's why I appreciate you for being here. I guess you've answered all the questions that people could possibly have, because they didn't got quiet on me now. Anything in the chat box? We talked about that.
And while you're doing that, I want to just slide one more piece in here.
Go ahead.
Folks, someone is experiencing this. You may not have resonated with the loss of safety or identity or those things, but I also want you all to recognize that there was a cost to whatever you have attained, right? Whether it be, again, I'm a poverty survivor, trauma disruptor. There were things that I gave up in order to chart a new path. Right. And so you all sacrifice a lot of sleep, you know, trips with friends, whatever it might be. Right. You work 2 and 3 jobs so that you could buy a house, and then COVID-19 happened and now you no longer qualify. Right. To do these things, you sacrificed a lot. Those are things that you gave up. Those are also losses that you accumulated in the name of success and survival. And so you got to honor that journey as well. And so I talk about that as the cost of making it. And so I love that you're bringing up this notion of being able to identify whether or not we're surviving or we're thriving, and making room to do that. Some of us have been in survival mode for so long, we don't even recognize when we no longer need that armor anymore, right? That we can actually put it down because we're safe, right? Physically, emotionally, financially safe. Right? And there's breathing room. I think COVID-19 is also amplifying that. I am a hoarder as well, because I have been poor. God don't want that for me in this leg of my life, right? And so I am super, super cautious, right? And so COVID, so there was like, oh, I should go, maybe I should sign that university contract. And God said, that is not where I want you to serve, right? And so do not allow those previous narratives of survival to cause you to do things that actually don't serve you on this leg of your journey. And I know that that
Mm,
comes from, to some degree, that comes from a place of privilege to be able
yeah,
to say, I'm going to deny this other income stream.
yeah, right.
Some of you know exactly what I'm talking
Yeah, yeah.
about. You
Mm-hmm.
don't have to continue to sacrifice in that way because we have learned to do that over
Mm,
time,
mm.
right? And that's also a thing that you have to grieve and let go
Oh, listen,
of.
that's a whole new grief you done named and labeled and made a thing. Oh
Yes,
my gosh.
right.
Ooh, y'all, that was so good. Yes, here go the comment. This the one right here. This is what I'm feeling right now. Yes, with all capitals. Yes, Angie P is with me. That was, and we don't even think about that. That's what I'm saying. We have
You just do it.
cumulative grief on so many, so many. A whole bunch of folks on this line and folks who watch the replay have suffered multiple traumas in their life, have had all of these losses, and you've just pushed through them as if I'm good because they told you you don't have time for that. But the reality
Right.
is either you gonna take care of it, it's gonna take care of you. So we
That's
have
right.
got to get in a space where we listen to our bodies, where we slow down long enough to do the work necessary to
Yeah,
manage the grief and losses in our life. And some of us have a lifetime of them that we've never addressed,
that's right.
ever.
And they will
Ever.
show up. Yep.
It does. And it can look like we talked about anxiety. And some folks will say, well, at what point do I know my anxiety is a problem? Is it a problem only because I feel nervous, or is it a problem when it disrupts my world? All of these things become problems when they disrupt your world.
Yes.
And that's when it's probably gotten too far, because there was signs and symptoms before it became disruptive.
That's right. And if
Yeah.
it's something that is concerning to you, right?
Yes,
I think that's another big thing around kind of mental health and wellness is that you don't have to wait until it's disrupting your world. If it's
exactly.
bothering you, if it's concerning to you, if you
Yes,
keep noticing it, you don't have to be sick and shut in to get healing and to claim space for you. Because that's what, if you see, I see my therapist consistently 50 minutes a week, sometimes 2 times a week,
just like me.
because again, you cannot do this work from an empty vessel. You just cannot do it. And you don't have to. You don't have to just endure, because you
Yes,
can when you there's resources available. And we go to therapy
yes,
before there's a problem, right? We can go to therapy
yes,
when we begin to notice a thing. It doesn't
yes.
have to be so catastrophic that
That
now
is
other people are noticing. Your voice,
exactly
your intuition, your rhythm is enough for you
to
to say,
say.
hey, I
I
want
got
to talk to
you.
somebody about
There
this.
it
I
is.
want for 50 minutes once a week or however often you go
To
to
go.
honor somebody else to look at this too.
Listen, there you go. So wait, Dr. Robinson, you gave about 4 words right there. Now, I want somebody to catch what she said a minute ago. She says you do not have to be sick and shut in to get some healing. Some of us
Mhm.
are waiting to be on a whole sick bed, can't
Yeah.
get up, can't see, can't talk, can't get a glass of water for yourself, waiting to get healed. And you can go grab that and do that work long before you get to that place. That right there
Mhm.
freed somebody tonight. Listen, y'all, the therapy right now is so much more accessible than it has ever been before.
It
You
is.
can do it in your car, you can do it in your bed. I got clients that be sitting in the bed having, you do you. Long as we can talk, I'm not going to judge where you feel comfortable at the moment. The idea right now is there are resources that have not been available at this
That's right.
capacity ever.
Yeah.
Insurance companies are allowing things that they have not allowed before. The government is making space for things they've not made space before for mental health services. And
Yeah.
so before this coronavirus medical pandemic grows into this huge mental health pandemic, I am just begging folks to get the help that is available. Dr. Robinson said the house doesn't have to be on fire. You don't have to be on your sick bed to go seek it. If you are feeling off, if you are feeling your rhythm is what is the word where the rhythm is off? There's a medical term for that. Arrhythmic or
Yeah.
something. I don't know. That ain't my life. But over there, if you're feeling a little to the
Yeah.
left, it becomes almost preventative before it
Yes.
blows all the way up. So
That's right.
listen, now is the time. Now is the time. I got one more I got one more question. Let me grab this
Yeah.
before we go, y'all. Our time is far spent tonight, but this is so good. Patricia says, My lights are out right now due to the storm. I'm alone, feeling anxious. What do you suggest I do to deal with this even right now? What would one do with current anxiety in a situation you can't do anything about?
Yep. And so I think sometimes we can find peace in the midst of a storm, right? And so I imagine that your lights are going to come back on.
Mhm.
I also imagine that you have access to a computer or something. Is it being alone while your lights are out that's causing the
Mhm.
most anxiety? If it is, who can you call? Phone a
Mhm.
friend, right?
Mhm.
Who can you call when you get off of this live so that you don't
Mhm.
have to be by yourself? Identify, are we feeling unsafe, right?
Mhm.
If we can actually identify that, you know what, my lights are out, but I am safe, we can
Mhm.
help disturb and interrupt the thoughts that might be not really grounded in reality from that anxiety, right? Our anxiety
Mhm.
tells us all kinds of things, right?
Oh
Your
yeah.
lights are off, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. Test them. Are they real? Are they true? Are they
Yep.
relevant right now? Right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
check the anxiety that's trying to control your reality, because for some of it, that anxiety has just continued to spiral out of control, and it has started linking things that are not connected. So check it. Ask the question, is this true?
Mhm.
What do I need? Right?
Okay. Mhm.
I think that that's really, really important. And if you feel like what helps you with the anxiety is, one, testing those irrational thoughts because they are likely present. It's a very central feature of
Yeah.
anxiety,
Yeah.
without saying or telling yourself that you shouldn't be anxious. You are. It's a natural response to your body
Right.
saying something is not
Something's
right.
wrong.
But
Exactly.
the cognitive, those thoughts actually don't serve you and they may not be true. So let's just check them
Okay.
for reality. Do some reality testing there, and be okay telling somebody else, hey,
Right.
my lights are off. The storm has
Right.
knocked this out, right? You might want to check something that might help you, right? Is to check to make sure that your power company is aware of the issue. If
Mhm.
not, you can notify them so that you know help is coming,
Is
right?
on the way.
Who are the
Mhm.
non-emergency services in your area that you can call? Because sometimes just having information can help slow that anxiety train down, right? We
Mhm.
can reground it that, you know what, the lights are off right now. They're not always going to be off, right? And if I can find a way to rest my body and my mind to go to bed, when you wake up, right? If we wake up, when we wake up in the morning, the light from outside will do some of this work for you, which gives you
Mhm.
an opportunity to triage, right?
All of it.
It's a phone a friend. You don't have to be alone. You might be by yourself, but you are not alone.
Got
And to be connected with folks who can hear the anxiety, right, without
it.
the judgment. That's important.
Okay, thank you for that. Listen, this has been wonderful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Robinson.
Thank
You are
you.
amazing. And if you guys were here earlier this week, I had another one. So these fabulous women that I'm connected to is all because of the National Board of Certified Counselors. These women are national certified counselors. They are amazing. They are committed to the work. Dr. Robinson and Dr. Brown, who's with me on Sunday, if you guys are with me, we are all in the same family, and I am so
Okay.
privileged and honored to be a part of a group of women such as yourself. So I'm very, very grateful that you were willing to be here tonight. So I'm going to put you back in the green room for just a second. Don't leave. Let me close out with the folks,
Okay.
and then we will be done for tonight. All right. So y'all, was that awesome or was that awesome? Listen, Dr. Robinson was absolutely amazing. She gave multiple words. I'm telling y'all, share this link. Somebody in your feed needs this information. Be sure you join us tomorrow night as well. Tomorrow night, we're dealing with couples and families, parenting. If you got some churn, y'all come on back because we're going to be talking about it with Dr. Kate Walker, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. It's going to be a great conversation. If you want to get real up-to-date texts about the summit, text HELP to 224-435-5433, and you'll get a text when we're going live. Like today, we had a last minute tech difficulty that we had to change. You would have gotten a text about that as opposed to an email if you caught that later. But that's to get real-time information about the summit. So if you need CEUs, you'll get an email tonight that'll have the questions for the CEUs as well as the link for you to take care of your payment for that. But thank y'all for being here. We'll see you back here tomorrow night at 7 p.m. for another episode of Help Healing Everyday Life Problems in a COVID-19 world. I'm so grateful, and I am growing so much from this myself, and I am so hopeful that you are as well. Y'all have a great evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.